Adler.
Here.
Kathy Bickenhauser.
Here.
Julia McCarthy McClaverty. James McDonald.
Here.
Solomon Martin.
Here.
Joshua Pollering.
Here.
Jolene Brink. Bruce Haroldson.
Here.
With 7 members present, we do have quorum, and due to the absence of 2 regular members, both alternates, Solomon Martin and Bruce Haroldson, will be voting tonight.
Thank you. The first order of business is approval of the minutes of the last meeting. Are there any corrections or additions?
I'll move to approve the minutes as written.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Is there any public comment on anything other than what's on the agenda tonight? Okay, seeing none. New business. Kevin with MUD. And state your full name for the record and everything, and if you would please.
Kevin O'Brien, and I'm here on behalf of the Missoula Urban Demonstration Project.
Perfect. Wonderful.
Shutter at the bottom. 0. There we go. Great.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me. I contacted Emmy about meeting with you all this evening and kind of informing you about a recent donation to the MUD project. I'm going to do a quick background on the project and then get into potential ways that we can partner and share this great resource. So the MUD project began in '81, called the Down Home Project, and it kind of transformed from people that were getting together kind of the victory garden ideas, and instead of putting the tools in all their different garages, putting them in one central location. This happened over the course of quite a few years and moved to our new site right across the parking lot from Home Resource as an effort to become a more centralized location and to give Missoula more tools in the community. So here we are building our site. We purposefully chose shipping containers and a lot of other pieces at our site to be demonstrations of sustainable living. One of the ways that we demonstrate that is through cider pressing and through that season as well. So kind of continuing our growth and development of the site through these photos and getting on to the cider mill and the ways that we could potentially be involved. I do have some photos of the cider mill later on in a bit, but the cider press was donated to us because this community member, Michael Brook, wasn't able to restore it. The mill was given to his family by the Prescott family, and he never had time to restore it. His goal was to restore it for his father, and friends of MUD know Michael, and they said, hey, do you want to bring the mill over to MUD and see if they can get it up and working again to share with the community? So that's how we became the current stewards of the mill. Some things that we've done, we've reached out to the Montana History Foundation and have requested a grant, and believe that number was in the neighborhood of $1,300 to restore the mill. We've partnered with Home Resource already to get some wood from the Mercantile to hopefully use as the structural supports. The thought behind that being that the wood from the Mercantile might have any sorts of chemicals, you name it, so we don't want that coming in contact with the cider. So researching the ties to the Prescott family, we've talked with the UM Archives, and they've gone through their photo gallery and haven't come up with anything. We have reached out to a couple other organizations. So we're needing help kind of ensuring that it was at one time the Prescotts, figuring out more about the Whitman's America cider mill. All of the cast iron has a number stamped onto it, so I'm assuming at one point in time there was a catalog to say, okay, I need part number 5. I've been unable to find that. So hoping to use your knowledge and resources would be great to partner there. We have reached out to the Montana State University, the Heritage Orchard Program, in an effort to see if there are other mills like this out there. There is one at the Moon Randolph Ranch Homestead, and we've worked with them on a number of different projects and will continue to do so. And other than that, just making sure that you all are aware of this great resource, and we want to be able to share that with the community. So here's a little bit more of the restoration. So Steve Nelson will be our project manager. He's the special projects guy for Home Resource, with an anticipated start date in May, depending on funding from the Montana Historical Foundation, and hoping to get it done before cider season this year. We're going to use electrolysis to remove any rust from the cast iron pieces, and then treat it with pork fat in the traditional manner that you do cast iron. So heating it up, and then coating it, and then heating it up again to dissolve away any extra. And then, as stated, for the wooden construction. So these are some pictures of the mill. Pretty intricate cast iron work on these, and feel free to ask any questions as I go along as well. There's the side profile. This photo doesn't do great justice, but one unique feature for this mill in particular is that it has two arms for turning, so that two people, one on each side of the mill, could be pressing. And in my research, I haven't found any other mills out there that have this kind of two-person mill. A little closer up on some of the gear work. Photo from the backside. So you can see the wood is quite worn down. You can see where people have put their hands on it, and this mill's in pretty good condition as far as I'm concerned for how old it is. And here is the photo with the patent date. It's hard to tell, but on the top it says patent November 19th, 1872. And then the number 10 is stamped there on the bottom. So as I noted, we do have two other cider mills. This one that we are hoping to restore in particular has a lot more historical significance and a lot easier tie-ins for the community. We meet with lots of school groups throughout the year, and the great push last year from Western Cider, the Great Bear Foundation, to glean up all the apples, trying to get in on that energy and share more of this history with the community is one of our goals. I guess it's now up to see if anybody has any interest or any points of contacts, any leads that I should follow up with.
I was going to suggest we get in touch with Mike Billings over Western, but it sounds like you guys are already.
Yeah, we're headed that way. Ellie Costello is MUD's executive director, and so we're going to, and she knows him through a different avenue, and we're going to work with them. And Caroline from the Moon Randolph Ranch Homestead also suggested working with him. Yeah.
I guess a question I would have is beyond fundraising, getting an actual amount of money to restore it, are you running into any sort of technical stumbles or questions that don't have answers, or craftspeople that you can't find, like any logistical kind of problems that way?
Not to my knowledge. That's a great question. Steve Nelson feels comfortable completing the work as far as the craftsmanship side, and MUD has a storied history in the community, so reaching out to craftsmen. Ellie has another contact who does woodworking. That was the other thing about the mercantile wood. Would it be fit for structural or would it not? And I'm not a woodworker, so I don't have those answers. And I was just curious to see if anybody had any other ways to restore cast iron. This is the research that I've done. I just didn't know if there'd be any experts in the audience.
I'm going to write myself a note to try to find some restorationists that I met back in Washington, D.C. over 10 years ago. If I can find their contact information, I will forward that along. I can't guarantee anything. It's been a while. But, I know somewhere in my super well organized pile of stuff, I have a metal restorationist phone number from a firm in Chicago. So not anybody you might be able to just bring out here, but somebody you might be able to call up and talk shop with.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
So we just completed the restoration of the Cascade County Courthouse in Great Falls, and there was cast iron in that particular project that we had removed and shipped back to Tennessee, and restored by a company called Robinson Iron, I believe is their name. They're the cast iron restoration company that did the Capitol in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
That's the same group.
Okay. They did amazing work with the cast iron, but if you have your contact information, I can find out what the guy's name. They were great to work with.
We use the electrolysis system in our wood shop, and it's pretty common for crosscut saws. It works really well.
Okay.
So if you have any questions or anything that we can help with that, give me a call.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful.
But talk to those experts first. Ours, the crosscut saws aren't cast iron, so.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make sure I was doing my due diligence and research and, treat the piece with respect and get it up and running again.
Do you know what kind of wood the original woodwork is in it?
I do not, but I'm over at the mud site pretty much 9 to 5, and we have it on site. So if you'd like to look or know somebody that would like to look at it, I think that would be a great tie-in, especially since this cider mill was made before the railroad had made it through Missoula. I think that's a neat, holy crap, this thing's heavy, and it came out here at some point.
Because I was just thinking, if you're wondering, what wood would work and is it structural enough and will it take the pressure or whatever, take a look at the wood that's there and that's lasted how long so far?
Yeah.
And if you use this same type and quality of wood, it's probably your best bet.
Anything else? Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, and we'll see what we can do. Maybe we can help you out some way. So.
Yeah, and I would love to contact this group once we get it finished to see if anybody kind of share that news around the community, because we do want it to be a community piece and share that historical education with everyone. So thank you for having me.
And the grants have been submitted. Excuse me.
Sorry.
The grants have been submitted, right, for the Montana History Foundation?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
And we should know hopefully in May whether we've been selected or not.
Okay. Sorry.
And I have Kevin's contact information, so if you'd like, I could just disperse it.
Yeah.
And then if anyone thinks of anything else, we can get in touch.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
All right. I guess that's all the new business. So old business is a presentation discussion of the historic demolition permit draft comments. And we received comments from everybody last week, and were able to spend some time last Thursday and part of Monday with Gwen and Emmy and I putting together the comments and addressing them all. So Emmy's going to kind of go through that. What we need to do tonight is just approve moving ahead, and then we will have a letter put together by the next meeting on April, whatever it is, 5th, something like that. Anyway, and first Thursday in April. And then we'll need to vote on that to send to the planning board, or the planning board, excuse me. Planning board for their meeting, which is the third week of April, and we'll move ahead from that point, where there'll be public input for the ordinance. So that's kind of where we're at. So, Emmy?
Come on. There we go. So how I thought we could do this is just go through section by section, and I can answer questions that were raised and address comments. Basically, we're gonna implement comments before planning board. So I'm gonna walk everyone through what comments will be implemented, what changes will happen based on HPC comments, and discuss everything that was submitted. So feel free to ask questions as I move along. So overall, Paul raised some good points about language consistency, plural, non-plural grammar. So making sure that we're using either building or structure, not both. So using structure throughout, good faith or bona fide, and we're going to use bona fide because we thought that sounded stronger. And then, oh, that is a typo, but there is another one about permit and the permit application. So just making sure that everything is the same all the way through. There was some questions raised about historic districts and contributing. Unfortunately, we can't apply that to the demolition portion of the ordinance. That would have to do a rewrite with other portions of the ordinance. So we have to table that for the time being because we're only dealing with demolition for this right now. And there's not, we can't go about that in section J, so that'll be as we move along for other rewrites in other sections. Generally, as far as additions, I'm sure you all are aware, but in ordinance language, you can have a commentary section, and that's not actually codified law, but it's a little bit about what we're trying to say. So adding commentary about applicant and owner representation. So preferably we'd want both people there, not just one or the other. We can't really mandate that, but adding a commentary that we'd like to have applicant and owner representation. Commentary as to the definition of a regulatory taking, what we're trying to say, what this is. An option for the Historic Preservation Officer to revert back to the HPC once we get to that final approval process, the head of development services, city staff, for consultation in the final decision so we can bring it back and have a group conversation, and adding that as a clause. Just adding the language which we had before about time. If the HPC fails to reach a preliminary decision within the time frame, no time extension has been asked, then the application will be stand approved. That's what we had in the last one, just kind of twisting the language so that it works with this new rewrite. For our requests for information, asking for environmental assessments or any knowledge of environmental hazards, that was a good thought that one of you had, which I hadn't thought of. Request information from past and current owners, so it doesn't just have to be the current owner. We can request from past owners as well. And deconstruction of the entire structure, so not just the historic elements, which is what we said for the mercantile, but mandating that we deconstruct the entire building. And then referencing our zero waste policy too, which we have in the city. Archaeological study, if deconstruction will disturb subsurface soils, which is another really good point. And when demolition by neglect is mentioned in the ordinance, we actually have an existing definition of what that means in our ordinance, and that's section K. So I can show you. In our ordinance, we have it all spelled out for what demolition by neglect means, so we can reference that in section J as well. So those are the general additions that we got from the comments, and then we'll just go through each section of where we had comments. So for the economic hardship, we're going to add that commentary as to the definition of a regulatory taking. Remove the low-income clause just because it was getting extremely sticky as we were trying to figure out how to go about that. And you know, the purpose is that by requiring all this information, we'll be able to assess whether someone is low income or unable to make this financial, you know, if this is a financial burden or not. And then also low income gets challenging when it's a residential house. So we just decided to remove that. And then again, just referring to demolition by neglect of section K, just for further clarity. And then I'm also just looking at our compiled notes to see if I can add anything. Also under applicability, which isn't up here, so I'll just reference some kind of minor things. These are just the major things, but there is a lot of minor word type things that we are planning on changing. So anything that was pretty minor, we're gonna implement and change. Adding partial removal when we were talking about the removal of a facade or significant part. And one reason why we talked about under applicability that partial removal is just to give us a little more leverage to try and push for a partial removal rather than a full demolition, if that makes sense. There was a question as to why we would have partial at all, and just so we can hopefully save some aspect of the building by clarifying that you can have a partial demolition versus a full demolition. So that was the thinking behind that. So those are the definitions. Those are kind of all the things that were really mentioned, all the comments. There was some comments about evidence. Are commission members expected to understand the legal standard? And yes, you are. But when it comes to that point, we will be working together to provide education and training and resources. I know it didn't feel like that maybe the first time through, but we've learned a lot since then. And I've gathered a lot of resources as to what economic hardship means, such as I don't know if you all are familiar, but the National Trust for Historic Preservation has a whole preservation law, materials, and education program. One of them is assessing economic hardship claims under historic preservation ordinances. So there are some resources out there that we can use moving forward, and so education hopefully will not be lacking. We just can't spell out absolutely everything in an ordinance just because that's our codified law. So just expecting that, you know, as we move forward, we will provide that education and trusting that it will be there. Moving on to step 4. Oh, another question was under definition of relocation, whether we should include feeling in that definition. And the reason I included feeling was because it's one of the 7 tenets of integrity. And if we are to relocate something, I think that feeling should be something that we consider. Moving on to 4, just fleshing that out a lot more. There was a lot of comments about how it was confusing and there wasn't really enough information there. So adding, bookending it with denial boxes, approve or denial at the very end. So I think that's on box 12. That would be 12. And including a timeline and having it match consistently with the sections in the ordinance so that all the language is the same. Including SHPO in there, and just making it more detailed than it is. So Paul had a lot of suggestions on that, so implementing those suggestions. On to 5. Again, going back to 4, matching box 4 for consistency and making sure that it's all very clear. We want this to be as clear as possible. There was a question about how applicants would know about the requirements, essentially, and this will be treated just like every other permit application for development services. So usually how applicants learn about that is at the front desk, and they request, a demolition permit. Hopefully they know they have an individually listed building, and the front desk staff would walk them through generally what would happen in timelines. For D, which, let me find it. Essentially just fleshing out what we're talking about. So making it clear. I heard loud and clear that there were some confusing things, so really just making it clear, saying, if a permit is preliminarily approved by the HPC pursuant to J6 as listed in the following section, so that kind of language, so that we're clearly going from section to section to section. There was a question about what if the applicant does not go through the preliminary review, and that's we use the word shall there, and shall is our legal standard. So if shall is in the language, it means they absolutely have to legally. So not until they start the process will the process actually begin, if that makes sense. And then moving on, I know that there was a lot of questions about the evidence and is the evidence sufficient or relevant or competent or credible or consistent. That, again, is in some of the resources that I will provide if this goes through. There's an entire page on the preservation law education materials that actually defines how commissioners should go about evaluating this. Is the evidence sufficient? Does the commission have all the information it needs to understand the entire picture, or is something missing? The application is not complete unless all the required information has been submitted. If additional information is needed, ask for it. So there is training out there. We just don't want to go so far into codifying that training within our city code. But it does exist. It will be there. We just need to walk that line between what is city code and what do we have to just seek outside of code. Let's see, for 6D, which is just that's again, just clarifying Making sure that the language is the same for consistency. It's not a meeting, it's a presentation. That was a good catch on Paul's part. And then adding that the Historic Preservation Commission may and should provide input regarding conditions for final approval, which will be issued by the Historic Preservation Officer. So adding more language as to the process of it. Is there anything else on there? So Kathy had a point about including language such as the Preservation Commission shall consider the realities of economics versus the goals of historic preservation, which is a really good point. But again, we're kind of getting into that sticky, we're in the code language versus commentary, and that is the point of the code, is to evaluate economics versus the goals of historic preservation, and that's what this code is doing, is giving you those tools to evaluate that. So hopefully that's just kind of inherent in there.
I think my biggest concern is being caught in a sticky situation where someone's going to say, I can't make a go of it. I told you guys I can't make a go of it, but we can see obvious possibilities. So, I mean, as much as we want to make this codified, and we're quasi-legal, quasi-judicial, sorry.
Yes.
I'm afraid there's still going to be some sticky, and I appreciate that you're really trying to take us out of that, and I worry about the sticky.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's a worry, I think.
I can see us getting into another tough spot. I think this is so much better than what we had before, but yeah, the concern is still there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely.
I think, if I may,
I'm done.
Just to comment on that, when you get into the situation of somebody saying, I can't make a go of it, but there being obvious possibilities, that's where putting the property up for sale is kind of the proof of the pudding. If they say, I can't make a go of it, but somebody else says, great, I'll buy it from you and I'll make a go of it. But we need it to be honestly on the market, not just advertised, but already under contract kind of thing. It
Mm-hmm.
needs to be open, honest, and if they really can't make a go of it, they should probably be okay with selling it. And if they can sell it to somebody who can make a go of it, I think that's the ultimate outcome for a situation like that. That's kind of our open path, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, that's a good point.
What's that? Yeah. Just to add another kind of lens of perspective, I suppose, in terms of what it really comes down to brass tacks is what we're looking at is an economic argument. And I think that one of the pitfalls in the situation or the scenario could be that there really is an economic argument to be made for the kind of non-tangential, non-market values that are economic values in historic preservation. And my concern would be that would get lost in the raw reckoning of looking at numbers, and that there's another element to economics which is not exactly cash valued as per the actual property in question, but as an economy as a whole for the whole city or region, that would have some economic boon that is really hard to account for. So as long as we're aware of that, and that might be a piece for commentary, when we're talking about bottom lines and we're talking about economic feasibilities, that we at least need to be aware of those sorts of other economic values.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And that's that's the challenge of historic preservation. That's fortunately that's our lot. That's our task. So how do we do that in America? I don't know. We're trying. So moving on to 8, the requirements. And again, just adding grants, distinguishing federal historic tax and Montana historic tax. Another thing that I missed was during the feasibility study is mandating that it be conducted by professionals from Western Montana so that we have people not from New York or Connecticut or something like that who aren't a part of this place, and adding that language in there. Again, the information can come from previous owners, and we'll clarify that. So as far as the putting it on the market, we're still waiting to hear back. So I reached out to some land use attorneys and the Museum Organization of Realtors to get the actual language down that will work. This is the trickiest part of writing this ordinance it's hard with legality and what is legal. But one really good thing that I took away is that in our previous language, we said to list in a local newspaper, and that's pretty defunct these days. Real estate isn't really listed in local newspapers. So making sure that we list it on a multiple listing service, which is how real estate is listed, such as LoopNet, and the National Trust for Historic Preservation real estate page. So mandating that the owner will list on those 2 things for a period of 90 days, which is 60 days longer than we had before, and not just in the Missoulian. So that's some language that we're working on right now, and that will be codified. Moving on to 9.
And just one question there. Is that, when you say 90 days, is that from the like it has to be published for 90 days? Or is it, like for instance, you could get it to the trust, and how long would it take for them? Like, does it start when they actually contract with the trust to advertise, and the trust magazine comes out quarterly or whatever it comes out?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I haven't looked into that, and that's something that really needs to be worked on. That's kind of the last piece, is getting that real estate issue cemented. Preferably, I'd like to see it on the National Trust at least for part of that 90 days, just getting it at least on there so we have it. I need to look into what that process is. Honestly, I didn't even know that the National Trust had a real estate page until like 2 days ago. So, yeah. But we're getting there. But I'm going to write that down as a good point. And then moving on to 9, the requirements for final approval. And one way that, as far as the ordinance in general, that we looked at is we have this preliminary approval and then we have the final approval. And the preliminary approval is just non-negotiable. Like, you absolutely have to do this as an applicant. As far as the final approval, we've gotten to the point where we've proved that it is an economic hardship. And so working for the final approval is more of those case-by-case things. It's a little more negotiable in terms of mitigation and documentation. and those sorts of things. One thing we're going to do, which was a comment on Jim's part, was to flesh out the documentation plan more to include in the ordinance what we specifically want, elevations, photography, and use HAB's language, not just saying HAB's quality documentation, but what we actually want. So adding that. There's really good questions about the redevelopment plan and how we can actually hold them to the character of at least downtown. And we will have our design guidelines implemented by the end of this year. So we'll add the language that any applicable design guidelines within Missoula will stand. And our design guidelines are sensitive to our historic downtown core. So we will have that as language too.
One question, I really appreciate taking on a development plan and having conditions that follow beyond a potential demolition. But last time we ran into this, we were told in the strictest terms that we could not do anything. We could not condition anything after the demolition, that a demolition application was strictly a demolition application. Does this actually change the advice we got from our attorney on that?
Yes.
Okay.
So this will
So this does enable us to, this doesn't set up a conflict that we'll see again?
Nope.
Okay.
Yep. So this is brand new language. All of the documentation, mitigation, redevelopment is brand new. So that will change. Changing. Let's see. Instead of accepting a bond, this was Steve will require a bond as far as financing for redevelopment. And then going to that end of deconstructing the entire structure, zero waste, and archaeology, and including that language as well. Which brings us to the next steps. So tonight we can discuss how we feel, our comments. If I didn't cover anything, I'm happy to go back. There was a lot of compiled comments, so I'm sure I missed a lot. And then making a motion to write a letter on behalf of the Historic Preservation Commission when we bring this to Planning Board, which will be on April 17th. And then following that, we'll go through a whole rigmarole through LUP, and then 2 readings of City Council. And then if all goes as planned, tentatively, it could be implemented by the end of May. So that's where we're at. So, questions, discussion, comments?
This will be no surprise to anybody, but I'm still worried about how much financial disclosure we're asking of people and how much of our judgment will be based on pocketbook versus, preservation, context, condition, integrity. If we have somebody that goes through a permit application and, can't come up with some of what we're asking for, do we leave them in a lurch? Are we able to waive some of those if, previous owners' information, or they can't get their hands on things?
If the information isn't there, and we have a clause that the HPC and the HPO can waive anything to their discretion, and they can also ask for additional information to their discretion.
Okay.
So we have that clause that we can waive or ask for more if we need more. And then one way that I've kind of been falling back on these what-if scenarios is written in that we have that the HPC can seek outside counsel, third-party counsel, economists, lawyers. We legally can do that, and we should do that. So if this does happen, for anything that we have a question on, we have the ability to seek help. and that is absolutely encouraged.
For the outside counsel, is that just the HPC, or can you also on your own?
That's a good question. I believe,
Or do we have to direct you to do that?
I'll look into that. Right now, it's just the HPC.
Right, and you had said that there was the clause to waive or add for more information, but I would hope that you could seek other
You're right. That's a good
information.
That's a good point. Yeah. I don't see that as being an issue. City employees usually seek outside information just because we don't have everything right there. But I'll look into that. That's a really good point. Mm-hmm.
And it's something that the city would have to pay for, from what we understand, for that person or whatever, so. Any other questions or comments at this point? I guess what we need tonight is just a motion to move ahead with this. We'll have a final letter put together by the next meeting, which we'll need to approve. We'll make all these changes, of course, get those into the ordinance, and then finalize it to move ahead to the planning board, which will have the public response or ask for public comment.
And that's actually something I didn't mention is before planning board, probably next week it'll go out for agency and public comment.
Yeah.
And all these changes that I just listed will be implemented before it goes to planning board. So this will happen in the next couple of weeks. But there's still time until April 17th to make more comments and anything else. So,
Yeah, we're hoping we can get a consensus, though, from the HPC
right.
to move ahead by the next meeting. But individually, you still have the opportunity to comment if you want to, so. Does that make sense?
I'll make a motion to move this forward then, with the corrections.
Is there a second? Okay. Any discussion? I guess I have to open it up for any public comment. Does anybody want to comment at this point? Okay, all right. We'll call for the motion.
Steve Adler.
Yes.
Kathy Bickenhauser.
We are voting to move ahead with the ordinance with the changes that Paul made that motion to move ahead.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes, please.
James McDonald.
yes.
Solomon Martin.
I likewise will pass.
Joshua Polarein.
Yes.
Bruce Harrelson.
Yes.
Paul Filicetti.
Yes.
With 5 yes votes, the motion passed.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Emmy. She's put a lot of effort into this. And I think what's really, and I'll just comment generally, but it's really quite different from our ordinance, well, maybe not from the original ordinance, but when it was changed, I can't remember how many years ago when they redid the whole zoning package. That's where we lost a lot of these things that we had in the original. So it's fortunate that at least City Council and our people are interested in getting this back to make it clear so we don't get in the situation we were with the mercantile. So anyways. Okay. Preservation plan, do we have anything on that? Nothing? Okay. Just a quick deal on education public awareness. We're going to go ahead with the awards in May, the first Thursday in May, with 4 Saturday tours at this point. And Emmy's kind of got that information together. The question that came up, though, is I really liked the Roxy last year for the award ceremony. However, we got some complaints that it's probably not going to be big enough to have a good awards as we improve this, as we move ahead. And should we be doing it somewhere else? And so I don't know if we can, I don't know where else to hold it, I guess. What I liked about it was with the big screen and really, you know, we can do a lot more things than we did last year in order to have the awards presented. And if we can do something else, anybody else got any ideas or things? Or
Have we just lost the governor's ballroom?
No. In fact, that's changed. The two sisters or whatever who had it, they are no longer involved in that. The
I think it's the Catalyst.
Catalyst, thank you. Catalyst Restaurant has taken over the governor's room and the catering. So it's I think going to be a little easier to work with them than we were before. So that seems to be, so we could do that again, and that gives us a little bigger space. We just don't have the big screen. We just have to put up a small screen, and we can still do it. I think it works fine, but I just personally, I just like the big screen to kind of make it like a, you know, Showtime or whatever. So I don't know. Anyway,
Is the Wilma too big?
one was probably too big, and that is really expensive. Governor's room, I think, is $400, and what I heard, things like the Wilma and the Roxy is $250, of course, for a smaller space. But the Wilma is a lot, unless we could get the owner to donate part of it. But that would be a big, yeah. I don't know, we can pursue it a little more, but maybe we'll see if we can have some more suggestions or at least having more ideas for the next meeting. So that'd be good.
Yeah, I was thinking about reaching out to sponsors. The Wilma would be awesome. I didn't even think about that as a plausible. But if we know of anyone who would be willing to sponsor that event, we could each do some outreach.
Yeah. And that's one of the things we talked about is with the awards. We like, for the award ceremony, we'd like to see if there are more sponsors that would help out with it. We have a pretty good budget. It's not great, but it gets us through, I guess is what I'm saying. But it'd be nice to even make it bigger and better by having some sponsors. And that's what a lot of other groups do. You know, the MPA, when we did the awards for there, we have all sorts of sponsors. For that, I think there was 12 sponsors at the last awards deal. So I don't know why we couldn't do it as a city too. So anyway, we'll move that ahead and see what we can do. We have some ideas for the 4 tours. Do you want to kind of go through that?
Yeah, so we were thinking doing the Unseen Tour again, which May we have the Heritage Downtown Planning Group. We're hoping we will be moving forward to have our first tour in May, so it would coincide with Preservation Month and our HBC tours. Another bike ride tour. We also talked about pairing with the Homestead and doing a workshop up there. I would really like to do a First Friday event, so maybe not a Saturday tour, but a First Friday, that first Friday, and maybe have a show of things that we've done and some relics that we have. And then what was that? There was another one, wasn't there?
Boy, I just lost it right now too. I had it written down. I didn't bring my notes. The bike tour, we're hoping to, in the past we've done an A.J. Gibson bike tour, and Raphael Chacon has done that. I haven't been able to get a hold of him to see if he wants to do it, but if he doesn't, I'll be glad to do it. But I think we want to tie in a bike tour with the group.
Well, that was 4, so I think that's what we...
Is that 4? Okay.
Yeah, so that's 4. So that's one a weekend we talked about.
Yeah, okay.
And then our submittal page is open as of today. And I posted on our Facebook and Instagram and web page and a group Mass email will go out to the city tomorrow. And I made a mock poster, which you guys can look at it. And I used the New Waves and Old Ways, which is what we talked about as the logo, which is digital right now. And so we are live, and it's all online, and you can submit. So spread the word, and we're good to go as of today. Oh, another thing is, I know in the past we've had a longer process with this, but with the ordinance, I got a little behind, so I'm shortening it. So I'm hoping that I did the nominations have to be submitted by March 21st. So then I can send all the nominations that were submitted to you guys within the week, those weeks before March 21st and our April meeting. So you can go out and see and evaluate, and then April will be our vote. So it's a little more condensed, but I don't think it'll be an issue. So that's our timeline right now.
Any questions on the awards? Okay. Oh, go ahead.
I know this kind of fell off our back end, and I apologize, I haven't been here in the last two meetings, but did we have a chance to kind of reframe the categories for the awards?
Yes.
We did. Okay.
We did. So we have commercial restoration, residential restoration, adaptive reuse, compatible new construction, cultural features and/or landscapes, the Dorothy Ogg Award, and the Centennial Award. So we have 7. And they're all defined on the submittable, and we did it less. We just did bullet points to make it really clear and simple, and we kind of broadened them to encompass more possibilities. And I'll send out since it just went live today, I'll send out tomorrow the site so that we can all look at it and send it to our friends.
Follow-up question. I know that I recall we had a conversation about, because we didn't have the awards last year, can we nominate buildings from the year previous to last year?
Yeah, so we opened it to the past 5 years.
Past 5 years, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
And we don't necessarily have to give out all 7 if there isn't anything. But those are the categories. And I think one of the things we did was with the, what do we call it? We kind of lumped all the things from fences and, all those different aspects into one category. I'm sorry, what are we calling that?
Yeah, the cultural features /
cultural
landscapes.
features, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Rather
So
than
kind
have
of
a fence category,
catch-all.
and it's just come under that category. So yeah, so it'll work out a lot better, and we can define it a lot better. So okay, all right, very good. Preserve Historic Missoula report. Dan and Matt. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Always getting after me, huh?
My name is Dan Hall. I'm with Preserve Historic Missoula. I'm one of the founding members and was the organization's first president. I have with me tonight the new guy, Matt, who's joined the board of directors for Preserve Historic Missoula. And a couple of things before we get into the endangered list, back to what you were saying about the award ceremony, we would entertain helping financially with the cost of renting space, if that's an issue for you. That, of course, would require approval of the board, but it's certainly something that we would be willing to consider. And I would ask also if maybe you'd consider Heritage Hall as a space. We're here tonight to talk about our 2018 Endangered Historic Sites list. This will be our 4th list. The first list we did was in 2008. We did a second one in 2009, and then the third one in 2015. We decided in January that we needed to get back into our regular projects. The mercantile has kind of sucked the air out of everything for the last several years, and we felt that this was a good step, a necessary step that we needed to take. And so what we're doing now is just asking for nominations, and I did hand out nominations forms. You can download the nominations form from preservehistoricmissoula.org from our webpage. And just real simply, the nomination process itself is very simple. We just need to know the name of the property, the address, give us a description of what the property is, and then a description of what the threat is to the property. We do want to know if this is on the register itself or if it's contributing to a historic district. And I talked to Emily, and she's agreed to act as that clearinghouse. So if anyone has any questions about whether it's an eligible property or not, they can contact her. And then in the past, we've kind of waffled on photographs, but Matt has agreed to go out and photograph everything for the list. We've already had there was a story that appeared in the Missoulian last week. We've already had a number of phone calls, some of which were not too surprising, some of which were very surprising. Post-hospital, there were a number of phone calls about that, and the post-hospital has been on the list in the past. St. Francis Church in Hamilton, there were a number of phone calls about that building. I had absolutely no idea. And then when I saw pictures of that, I was like, oh, wow. And it is indeed threatened. And so the point being that it doesn't necessarily have to be in Missoula. We will take a nomination from outside of Missoula. We have done that in the past. In the past, we've accepted nomination for the Bonita Ranger Station, which is not in the city of Missoula. In looking at nominations from some of the past lists, we've had some successes. We've had some, we're not really sure. We need to go back and do a status update, if you will, so we can figure out what happened. The Bonita Ranger Station, for example, is one that we're really not sure of. We've had a couple of epic failures. I think in terms of let's just focus on the success. I think Bonner was an epic success. That was brought to our attention, it was placed on the list, and you look at it now and it's just, wow. Lincoln School is standing. I think that was a real positive outcome. We have lost a few of our historic schools, and of course the mercantile went down, but that's the nature of the list. And the purpose of the list is to generate a community discussion. That's what we want. And there have been some nominations in the past that rankled some feathers. And people, they wanted to discontinue the endangered list. And my answer to them has always been, the purpose of the list is to have that public conversation. And as an example, one of the nominations a few years back was the Radio Central building. And someone brought that to us with some period photographs of that building downtown in its heyday. It was an eye-popping, gorgeous building. Unbeknownst to us, there were only a few people who knew the real condition of the building. And when they put the aluminum skin on that thing, they did quite a bit of damage. And the ability to restore that to its historic appearance has probably passed. But that was the purpose of the list, and it served its purpose. And we had a conversation about that building. And the developer, the property owner, was not happy. There were some people in the community who were not happy about it. But point being that we had that conversation, and everyone now understands what the story is with Radio Central. And so if you have buildings that are historic sites that you're aware of that you want to include, please bring them to us. And I want to back up here. We've had some repeat nominations over the years. The fairgrounds has made every list. Missoula's historic districts have made every list. And I want to read from you the 2008 nomination for Missoula's historic districts. The lack of guidelines highlight the problems inherent with new construction in historic districts and the need for zoning codes that require sympathetic treatment of historic districts. The city zoning codes are currently being revised. That was 2008, and here we are. We're going through the same exercise again. I don't know if the historic districts will be nominated again, but it certainly would be apropos. We've had some nominations, repeat nominations, but they were for different reasons. The Lolo Trail has been on the list twice. The first time it was on the list was because of the checkerboard ownership. And Plum Creek was leaving town, and nobody was certain if the Forest Service was going to be able to acquire the property up Lolo Creek. And there are pieces of the trail that are visible, and they are on Plum Creek lands. And that threat has now gone away. But then there was the possibility of a cell phone tower that would have been within the boundaries of Travelers Rest and the Lolo Trail. And so the Lolo Trail was put on the list again, but for a different reason. I think this year's list, we would like to have at least 10 nominations, and I think we will be able to reach that. Our goal is to have, Matt and I will be out doing a dog and pony show for the rest of this month, and we'll be talking to as many people as we can. If you have something you want to nominate, get that information to either one of us. We would like to have this done by the end of March so that we can take it to the PHM board for our April meeting, with the idea that we will then be able to prepare posters and have a public presentation ready to go in May to coincide with the award ceremony. So are there any questions?
Question? Solomon?
Not that we need a clear answer, but would you say that there's any geographical barrier, or how far out can we go? You know, you were talking about Lolo or...
Keep it in western Montana.
Western
That is
Montana.
our geographic area of operation.
Okay. So it could be, it doesn't necessarily even need to be in Missoula County.
Correct.
Right, okay.
And if I could, one thing that I forgot to mention was the nature of the threat. And that's wide open for interpretation, and that's perfectly fine. The NCO quarters at Fort Missoula were nominated because they were being neglected. And I really thought when those buildings were nominated that would have traction, and that something would happen. And they still sit out there boarded up with plywood to this day, with nothing happening. And so the nature of the threat is wide open for interpretation.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Emmy?
Is there going to be more done that has to do with previous lists and what is happening now? Would you want to do like a presentation or something, or anything else about where we are now with previous buildings that were listed on the list? I know that was mentioned in the news article, so
it was.
Just curious.
We do need to do an update, and that's one of the things that we have to look at this year, because there are so many things that we haven't gone back and looked at or kept track of. I think, but the question is, we don't want to step on your toes for the award ceremony, and so we need to be respectful of that space and make sure that we're not stealing from what you're trying to accomplish with the award ceremony, because that really deserves front center stage there.
Well, I mean, we could partner for a different time in May, for Preservation Month, if it wanted to be part of like a First Friday thing or some sort of show of, this is where we stand with our endangered over the past couple of years, and do a separate presentation or show or something like that.
I like the idea, and if you're agreeable to that, we could probably do a status update presentation at the same time you're doing your award ceremony. But I would leave that to you, because we wouldn't want to step on the award ceremony.
I don't know if it's necessarily stepping on toes. It might be a good kind of build-up to Because if it's increasing awareness and getting people more aware of what's going on, and then we have a few other events going on just as people are having their conversations, that might get more people out.
And it would show them what they can do. This is what
Yeah.
you have, this is what you can do.
Do you guys have your microphones on for some reason?
I do.
Okay, good. Well, thank you. Yeah.
And one last thing, Jim, for the banners, if you need money for that, let us know. We do have funds available, so we'll be able to.
Oh, okay, I was told differently, so we are, and
I'm the
we're-
treasurer, so
We're too
I'm
late,
pretty
we're
good
too
at
late to put, yeah, I was told differently by someone else, and it's too late now for this year, and we lost it last year, we lost our positions because we were able to do it last year.
Okay.
So we're gonna have to probably wait till next year. I'll contact MDA and see if there's a possibility somewhere.
Okay.
And, but, well, thank you.
Sure.
I was just somehow told differently by someone else, so, yeah, but we can look at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are those street banners? Like
Yeah.
on Higgins banners? Is that what we're talking
Yeah.
about? Oh, cool.
We have 24 banners that Preserve Historic Missoula paid for, and a couple of them came off, and one was run over by a police car, and it's got a big tire track across it, but when he was trying to keep it from going down the street.
Oh,
But,
Missoula.
But anyway, so we're going to have to replace some, but we do have at least 22 that are in very good condition. And of course, the one thing that's bad about it, one was on the Mercantile, and of course, that's gone. So, but we may still use it just to talk about preservation. So, anyway, but yes, we were always fought with the Wildlife Film Festival, because they liked the bridge in the first block of Higgins on the north side, and but some years we were able to get that area, but then the last few years we've been kind of set up for Broadway and part of Higgins to the north, but I think we've already lost that position for this year. Well, we lost it because we didn't do it last year, but so I'll still check into that and see if we can do somewhere. If not, we'll make sure we get in early next year and get it in a prominent place. And we'll probably have to look and see if we could probably get a few more and take care of those ones that are damaged and see what we can do there. So we'll be talking to you guys. Okay? Thank you. Yeah. So, all right. Well, very good. Staff report? I may have to leave here in about 5 minutes, but I don't want you to, don't.
So last month I presented on our CLG grant, and that has been accepted, and we've been awarded the full amount. So we're good moving forward with that. The Downtown Heritage programming is going very well. The Missoula Downtown Association or Partnership Board has approved our budget and intern request. And we have a formal interview with our intern next week. So moving full force on that. And again, we're planning for the first tour to happen on during May. And the Missoula Downtown Association is willing to host everything on their website with registration for tours and information and everything for that, which is great. I already talked about the ordinance. The Moon Randolph Homestead, I don't remember if I said this last time, but we applied for a grant in rehabilitating the root cellar. They want to have a summer intern, which I helped write the job description for, and that's posted on PreserveNet now, and we've already had 4 applicants, so that's great, and that'll be up till March 9th. Then we're going to do interviews the end of the month, which will be great. We're also talking with Mansfield Archives to get the existing archives out of the one of the buildings up there, because there's already been mice damage and water damage, and we're losing documents to that. So it looks like, I know we're talking to Donna, that they are willing to hold the archives for the Moon Randolph at the university, which would be very nice as well. There's going to be the Prune the Moon for the Historic Orchard workshop on March 10th, so it's coming up between 9 to 3, and it's open to the public. I plan on being there. And there's a new website for the Moon Randolph, and it just launched, and it's really beautiful, and it's really cool. So I encourage everyone to look at it. It's moonrandolphhomestead.org. So there's a lot of good things happening for the homestead. The fairgrounds, I met with Emily Bentley and Paul and other city employees to talk about the current phasing just a week ago. And mainly it was about water and things not related to historic preservation. But Paul's going to be giving us a presentation to the HPC next month. So we'll have a full update then. The Fort Missoula Hospital, which we just talked about, I met with Dave Strohmeyer and Tate Jones, who's a board member of the Northern Rockies Heritage Center, and we discussed the potential for the Northern Rockies to acquire it. I know they want it to use like Heritage Hall. So I basically just talked about zoning and the fort overlay and how to kind of leverage that for that use, which would be a perfect use for the building. As we all know, it's for sale right now. So, Missoula Design Excellence, which is the downtown design guidelines and the corridor, such as Brooks Street design guidelines, is moving right along. There's going to be another community workshop on Tuesday, March 20th at 5:30 at the Doubletree. And this will be an update as to where we're at right now. There's been a lot of work. It's still pretty highly reflective of historic preservation, especially in the downtown, not as much in the corridors. But I encourage you all to attend, because the more we can talk about our historic downtown core and design guidelines, the better. So please come to that and provide comment. 3 demolition permits were signed over February. 2 were associated with the Russell Street Bridge alteration, and they went through Section 106 back in like 2014. 1407 River Road and 1451 Broadway, and neither are historic. And then another one for 1905 Margaret, which is not historic either. I've been talking with MDT as they're gearing up for the Higgin Bridge rehabilitation. So far, we're just talking through everything, so we haven't gotten yet to whether there will be adverse effects, just because we haven't seen the plans yet, so it's still kind of working. But I'll let everyone know once I know. Kathy and I and Keith Thurlkill, I don't know how to say his last name, met at Kathy's amazing Forest Service office, which was very cool, to discuss the Whitaker Park Forest Service radio building, which I've brought up a few times, which I also think would be a great candidate as an endangered building, and the potential for moving and saving it. It's currently owned by Parks and Rec. And I'll be presenting with Keith, who's a neighbor, at the next Far Views Patty Canyon Neighborhood Council. As far as we've done some work, Bruce helped in terms of getting basic finances as to whether we can rehabilitate it, whether we can move it, what the realities are for that assessments. I met with Melanie Brock and the executive director of ZAC, so the Arts Council. They're in the process of purchasing the Studebaker building, which is individually listed downtown, and they just wanted to know what that meant. And it was a great meeting, and we talked about the National Register, the process, and they had some questions about some masonry maintenance, which Saul went out and took a look, which was very helpful, and thank you for that. It looks like it'll be going into good hands, which is a good thing. I did have the thought of sending out a New Year's letter, which I mentioned the past couple times to owners of historic properties, but I haven't gotten to it still. So I'm thinking that once I find a minute, sending out that letter pre-preservation month to do, you know, this is what we're doing. It's almost May. These are our activities. These are the resources for your building, and just doing a call for outreach for that. So more of a spring letter. And then I had a thought, and this was after going to Kathy's office, is if we do have not much on our docket, which we've had quite a bit on our docket lately, but if we do, I thought it might be neat if each one of us did an informational presentation on what we do, because we have a lot of great minds here, and we do a lot of projects, and we don't hear from each other that much. So something to think about. Let's see. Just some things that are happening in the wider community. The museum, the Missoula Art Museum, is having a free workshop series for archiving, preservation, and conservation. And that's going to be March and May, and it looks really interesting. So I have that here if you're interested. There's the Montana Preservation Alliance Roadshow, which is coming up. And then my last thing is I received 2 big packages in the mail yesterday from a fellow who lives in Taos, New Mexico, and he was going through his garage and found a whole bunch of relics from Spider's Maverick Bar, which was torn down in 1994. And he donated it to Missoula. And if you want to see, there's a full canvas, an oil on canvas that was behind the bar, and it's like half the size of this room. It's in my office. There's a pinup girl. She's awesome. There are a lot of wrestling posters. There's lady wrestling posters, all from the 40s, as well as Spider, which his name was McCullum. Some odd personal things, such as his World War II driver's license and a Union card, and a lot of old 1940s relics. So they're all in my office. Maybe I'll bring them next time if you guys want to see. I know that Spiders was quite a place in Missoula history, so yeah, pretty neat. That's all.
Thank you. Very good. So, any other comments from the members? Okay. If not, we are adjourned.